I make no explanation as to how this letter I'm about to share with you came into my possession, but I will give you a caveat that any similarity to persons living or dead is purely coincidental. But anyway, this is what I found on my desk this morning. To my delectable Charybdis, my true little brother in the unfaith. By now, I'm sure you have heard of what has happened to my predecessor, the abysmal Undersecretary Screwtape. It would seem he forgot the prime directive of pandemonium: provide food or become food. And it was this topic that led to his being summoned for dinner, and what followed was a rather tender subject. Well, it may be something that one ingests by mouth, it can hardly be called food. So I find myself in the unfamiliar territory of wanting to help you as you begin your work as a junior tempter. A human soul looking through the lens of eternity when that very brief time they call life ends, though either the beatific or miserific vision never ends, it is that soul that makes the best feast. The key to getting them to the table of our Father below is to create an ever-increasing desire for an ever-diminishing pleasure. Then you will find, as one of their own poets has said, I came to find that I spent my whole life doing neither that which was good nor that which I liked. The taste of a soul in utter despair is a most dainty morsel, and I hope to be enjoying it from your hand quite soon. Now, as this is your first assignment, allow me to correct some of your missteps. I see your patient is new to the faith, but still quite attached to her accustomed ways of doing things. This is excellent campaigning weather, as you can easily make her think that her new contact with the enemy was just a phase which she will grow out of once the emotional high of religion has worn off and the tedium of actually living the faith begins. You must keep her constantly seeking that emotional high and lead her to think that if it disappears, and it will disappear, then she didn't really need the spirituality of the institutional church after all. If you keep her head in the clouds, you'll have no problem keeping her soul in hell. You must not let her come to the realization that all this talk of love is real and is to be lived out. So long as we can keep her from acting on what she sees and hears and feels when in the congregation, then we have her. But failing this, you'll have to resort to more direct temptations. Just as the enemy has endowed each of these hairless bipeds with certain things they call spiritual gifts, so too did our Father's first temptation leave them each with certain spiritual deficiencies or weaknesses. Your patient will undoubtedly have some areas where it will be easy to tempt and others where all your temptations will come to naught. That bratty, pestilent Wittenberg monk once revealed our little secret when he said, old men are tempted by fame and glory. Middle-aged men are tempted by wealth and power. And young men are tempted by young women. Your job, my delectable Charybdis, is to constantly probe and poke your patient until you discover her weaknesses. Once that's done, you can return to those temptations over and over, and by sheer attrition, weigh her down. Once she yields to your temptations, make her think that there's nothing more to be done. Our philological arm has done great propaganda work with the phrase, well, that's the way God made me. And so all manner of temptations are scarcely to be resisted once that is believed. But I caution you not to go for the glory shot. those spectacular sins you first-time tempters are so eager to report. What good is turning your patient into a highwayman when a simple tax dodger will do? Why waste time and energy making an adulteress of her when the same end can be gotten by making her a nagging, unsupportive, disrespectful wife? It is not the size or the type of sin that matters. All that matters is that they are led ever farther away from the enemy's influence and so become more fattened and ready for our enjoyment. Any sin, so long as it becomes habitual and never repented of, will do the trick. So find where she is vulnerable and exploit it. And you will have several allies on your side for this. The first is your patient's own body. We, being pure spirits, unpolluted with corporealness, are free from the demands of the flesh. Remember our father's battle in the desert. The first sortie was directed to the body. Remind your patient that she needs her sleep, or she doesn't have the time or the energy to listen to the enemy's instruction, or to feed on his very self, or to be built up by standing together with others, or even the time or energy to come into his presence and talk to him. Keep her in the I need to take care of myself first mode of thinking, and your work will be all but done. This may not lead to any sins of commission worth writing home about, but it will make for a plethora of sins of omission. Your second ally is the world in which your patient lives. Our cultural devils have been frightfully busy the last 50 years or so, and have made great headway in removing any encouragement to live out her faith in the world in which she is forced to live. We have all but done away with Sunday morning worship by substituting yard work, sports, shopping, and a host of other real-life issues to deal with. Gone now are the days when anyone would speak up about not living together before being legally wed. We have culturally indoctrinated them to dismiss the church as outdated or irrelevant. Help her to feel that she's really finding her place in the world, all the while knowing it is the world finding its place in her. Keep her spiritual inquest to token Sunday morning appearances, and she will be ours. Another great help to you can be the patient's own religion. You know the writings as well as he that wrote them, and that word cannot be unwritten, but it can be corrupted. Remember our Father's method of making your patient ask, did God really say? But do not let her read what the enemy actually said. Twist the words, add or subtract to them subtly, make them mean other than what they mean. Keep her always in our version of the book, and she will misapply, misdirect, misinterpret, and misuse this most powerful weapon of the enemy. Build her pride in being a good Christian, and let the virtue of humility and concern for others be far from her. Remember, a spoiled saint or a Pharisee is just as good as one with no faith, and a good deal more fun. Keep her in the church, but never of the church, and all is one. Now, the enemy, of course, has means to counter these temptations, and you should have learned from Slubgob how to counter them. I grow faint with hunger to hear of your first victim, so I will be brief. I have already written to you of how you may render the word innocuous to your temptations, and I encourage you to pay close heed to those instructions. For if this word, properly understood and taught in its fullness, truth, and purity, were to be used, well, there's not a temptation created in all the millennia past that can stand up against it. If you can, keep her from the word entirely. Use her own fleshly needs in the world to keep her from getting up an hour earlier on Sunday or staying an hour later to join others in study. Keep her so busy with her own needs that she can't spend an hour during the week with others to mind the treasures of it. Barring that, the best you can do is to put it out of her mind the moment the worship service or the Bible study ends. The second means is also easily to counteract: the sacrament. Being bound to a physical existence, that which does not work according to the laws of the physical world must be dismissed by them as some kind of hoax. They scarcely believe that our enemy's true body and blood can be present in, with, and under the forms of bread and wine. And how can such a small amount of bread and wine counter such a massive amount of sin anyway? So long as she never sees that this sacrament will give her ample defense against your temptations, may fire at will. In my next letter, I will delve more deeply into the third impediment to temptation, that of prayer. I see from your patient's dossier that her prayer for her is still a call of last resort, a lifeline when nothing else seems to be working. That is exactly where you are to keep her. Little by little, even the desire to pray will fade, and she will seek out any means that will prevent this kind of face-to-face presence with the enemy. It is only when prayer becomes a first response instead of a final resignation that it becomes dangerous to us. As she does not pray at morning or evening or before meals or whenever the need arises, it does us little harm. If it were to become regular and habitual, if time were to be set aside for it each day and nothing be allowed to intrude on that time, if her prayers were for, or even worse, with others, well, then all our works would be undone. But as long as it remains a weekly recitation of the enemy's prayer done by rote without much thought as to what she is asking for, well, prayer will do us very little harm. The final defense she has against your temptations is also easily overcome, that of the fellowship or the church. Now, by church, I do not mean it as we see it, spread out throughout the continents and centuries like an army with banners unfurled and ready to storm the gates of our Father below. A terrible spectacle indeed. But rather, think of church only as that little parochial organization she has recently become a part of. Do not let her think that church is anything bigger than the 30 or so gathered at Redeemer Newton. We have done great work sowing the seeds of division so that from bottom to top, they are now in full bloom. And from top to bottom, the church has no sense of who she is. Denominations are almost at war, and in our glory days were at war with one another over insignificant points like robes and hats and which music may or may not be played. Within denominations, battles continue to rage after decades about the service of women, who should come to the sacrament and how often it should be offered, what hymnal to use, and a whole host of other matters which have very little to do with the eternal outcome of a human soul. Within congregations, we have also been at work fractioning and splitting them into churches within churches. As one says, I belong to Apollos, and another, I belong to Paul, and another, I belong to Cephas. So long as we can make her a partisan, then the church will not stand in the way of your temptations. Drive from her mind the thought that she is now part of something that has withstood our assaults for almost 2,000 years. Keep her from contemplating and catching that vision which has been passed down by the Paraclete to Redeemer. Keep her consistently finding fault with her brothers and sisters, an easy enough task to accomplish, and true Christian fellowship will never emerge. I expect regular reports on your progress and look forward to the day when we may meet together and enjoy the fruits of our labors. Your ravenous father in the unfaith, Wormwood. So how will you deal with temptations? We all have a guardian angel. Should it surprise us that we have a guardian demon, a tempter assigned to work with each one of us, probing and prodding and putting before us always something just out of reach, turning us from the ways we should walk? How will we withstand that? Well, we have the same things that Jesus had. Prayer, the word, and one thing he didn't have, the sacrament, to strengthen us and to build us up, so that when the day of temptation comes, we may stand firm in our faith.